somewhere beneath the floor of the room you're lying in, beneath the foundations and the pipes and the old roots, there is rock, and inside that rock, pressed flat by unimaginable weight, lie the bones of animals that ruled this world for more than 150 million years. They are gone now, every last one of the great ones, or so we tell ourselves. But tonight, in the warm dark behind your eyes, I want to ask you something gentle and enormous, a question that scientists in quiet laboratories are beginning to whisper out loud. What if science could bring the dinosaurs back? Before we drift off together, if you feel like it, leave a quiet word in the comments. Tell me where in the world you are and what hour it is where you're resting tonight. Now let the day go. Let your shoulders sink into whatever is holding you. We'll stand beneath creatures so large that the ground itself trembled when they walked. We'll learn how they truly lived and how they truly vanished in a single terrible afternoon 66 million years ago. And then, when the facts are laid out as gently as stones along a path, we'll do the thing that only imagination allows. We'll undo it. We'll let them come back, and we'll follow, step by quiet step, what a world with dinosaurs in it might actually feel like. For the forests, for the oceans, for the other animals, and for us. But all of that is still ahead. For now, let's simply meet them. Let's begin where every good story begins, with who they were. Picture, first, the word itself, dinosaur. It feels ancient, doesn't it? As though people have always known it. But the word is younger than the steam train. It was invented in the year 1842 by an English anatomist named Richard Owen, a brilliant and rather difficult man who spent his days bent over enormous fossil bones that nobody could explain. Farmers and quarry workers across England had been digging them up for generations. Vast thigh bones, teeth the size of bananas, vertebrae a child could not lift. They were called the bones of giants, or of dragons, or of men drowned in the Great Flood. Owen looked at them more carefully than anyone before him, and he realized they belonged to no living family of animal at all. They were reptiles, yes, but not lizards, not crocodiles. They were something else entirely, a lost order of beings that had once walked the very same hills, now dotted with sheep. He needed a name for them, and so he reached into Greek and joined two words together, Deinos, meaning fearfully great, terrible in the old sense of awe-inspiring, and sauros, meaning lizard, terrible lizard, though as we'll see, much of what Owen imagined turned out to be wonderfully, completely wrong. They were stranger and more marvelous than he ever guessed. To meet them properly, you have to let go of the calendar. You have to let go of years and centuries, and even the idea of human history altogether. Everything you know, every empire, every cave painting, every campfire your ancestors ever lit, happened in the last few thousand years. That is a single breath. The dinosaurs lived in a span so long that the human mind simply cannot hold it without help. So let me give you a way to hold it. Imagine the whole history of life on Earth pressed into a single calendar year, beginning on the 1st of January and ending at midnight on New Year's Eve. On that calendar, the dinosaurs do not even appear until the middle of December. They rule the world right up until the 26th, and human beings, all of us, every king and farmer and stargazer who ever lived, arrive in the final 30 minutes before midnight. The dinosaurs were not a chapter in the story of life. They were most of the book. Their age has a name, Geologists call it the Mesozoic era, the era of middle life, and it stretched across roughly 180 million years. We divide it into 3 long acts, each with a name you may have heard whispered in films or museums. First came the Triassic, the dawn of it all, a hot and dusty world where the dinosaurs were small and uncertain newcomers, scurrying in the shadows of older, stranger creatures. Then came the Jurassic, the great flowering, when they grew into the giants the world remembers, the long-necked titans, the plated grazers, the first great hunters, and finally the Cretaceous, the longest act of all, the age of flowers and feathers, of the most famous monsters of all, ending in fire. Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. Say them slowly, like the names of distant countries you will never visit, because in a way, that is exactly what they are. Now let me put a single image into your mind and let it grow. It is a warm afternoon in the Jurassic, perhaps 150 million years ago, in a place that will one day be called Wyoming, though there is no one yet to name anything. The air is thick and green-smelling. There are no birds singing, not the way you know birdsong, but there is sound everywhere, a low chorus of insects and the creak of giant ferns, and across a wide floodplain, moving with the unhurried patience of something that fears nothing, comes a herd of the largest animals that have ever walked the surface of the earth. Their necks rise like the masts of ships, their tails stretch behind them like rivers. With each step, the ground shudders, and small creatures scatter from the trembling. These are the sauropods, the brachiosaurs, and the diplodocids and their kin, and we will return to them because their size is almost impossible to believe and beautiful to try. For now, simply let them walk across the dark behind your eyes. Let them be the first dinosaurs you meet tonight, vast, gentle, grazing the tops of trees no other animal could reach, utterly unbothered by the passing of time they had no way to measure. But the dinosaurs were never only the giants. That is the first thing the museums and the movies get a little wrong. We tend to remember them as a parade of monsters, each one bigger and toothier than the last. The truth is far richer. The dinosaurs were not a handful of famous beasts. They were an entire living world, as varied as the animals alive today, perhaps more so. There were dinosaurs no larger than a chicken, darting through the undergrowth on 2 slender legs. There were dinosaurs armored like tanks, with clubs of bone at the ends of their tails. There were dinosaurs with sails on their backs, dinosaurs with crests like trumpets that could call across whole valleys, dinosaurs with frills and horns and beaks and spikes. Some ran in herds across open plains. Some, we now believe, dug burrows. Some cared for their young in great shared nesting grounds, returning year after year to the same patch of earth, the way sea turtles still return to the beaches where they hatched. They were not a monster, they were a kingdom. And here's the detail that changed everything, the discovery that turned the whole picture upside down within living memory. For more than a century, we drew the dinosaurs as Owen first imagined them, as enormous, scaly, sluggish reptiles, cold-blooded and slow, dragging their tails through swamps. Then, beginning in the 1990s, fossils started coming out of the ground in northern China that were so well preserved you could see the impressions of skin, and on that skin, around those bones, was something no one had dared to expect. Feathers, not on a bird, on dinosaurs, small predators, cousins of the famous hunters, covered in soft, downy fluff, some with sweeping plumes along their arms and tails. It was as if someone had reached into the deep past and turned on a light. The dinosaurs we had imagined as gray and reptilian may in fact have been as colorful as parrots, as fluffy as owls, as quick and warm and alive as any creature in your garden tonight. Because, and hold gently onto this thought, for we will return to it before the night is through. The dinosaurs never actually left, not entirely. When you wake tomorrow and hear that first thin call outside your window, the sparrow on the wire, the gull over the harbor, the crow crossing a gray morning sky, you will be hearing the voice of a dinosaur. The birds are not the descendants of dinosaurs in some distant, watered-down way. They are dinosaurs, the same branch of the family that produced those small feathered hunters in China, survived the catastrophe that killed all the rest and carried on and became the 10,000 kinds of birds that fill the world today. So the question we are asking tonight is stranger and more tender than it first appears. We are not asking whether life can be conjured from nothing. We are asking whether we might call back the ones who didn't make it, the giants, the lost branches, the ones whose songs no living ear has ever heard. That is the quiet thrill, humming beneath all the science we will explore. For most of human history, the dinosaurs were simply gone, as final and untouchable as the dead always are. You could dig up their bones. You could stand beneath their skeletons in a museum hall and feel that pleasant shiver of smallness. But you could never, ever meet one. They belonged to a country with no roads leading in. And then, slowly, in laboratories where the lights stay on long after dark, that certainty began to soften. Scientists learned to read the faint chemical letters of ancient life. They learned to take the living blueprint of one creature and gently edit it toward another. They began, very cautiously, to use a word that for 2 centuries had belonged only to dreams and to fiction: de-extinction, the bringing back of the lost. And though the path from a bird's egg to a living dinosaur is far longer and far stranger than any film has ever shown you, we'll walk every honest step of it later, I promise. The path is no longer purely imaginary. Somewhere out there tonight, a serious person in a quiet room is working on it. So that is who they were, the terrible lizards that were not lizards and were not always terrible, the kingdom that ruled the earth for an almost endless stretch of deep time, then vanished in an afternoon, leaving only stone and a thin thread of feathered survivors singing in our gardens. Over the chapters ahead, we'll come to know them not as monsters, but as animals, as living things that were born and grew hungry and grew old, that fought and fled and slept, perhaps, much as you are about to. We'll measure them honestly against the world, against the bus and the building and the elephant, so that their size stops being a number and becomes a feeling. We'll learn how they truly fell, and then, only then, when you understand exactly what was lost, we'll allow ourselves the gentle impossibility of imagining it found again. But that is all still ahead of us, far down the quiet road. For now, there is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. The bones are still in the rock beneath you. The birds are still asleep on their wires, and the giants are still walking, slow and patient and enormous, across the warm dark behind your eyes, exactly where they have been waiting for 66 million years for someone to imagine them back. Stay there with them a while. Let your breathing match their unhurried steps. There is so much more to see, and we have all night to see it. When you fell asleep last night, or when you drift off tonight, your mind let go of numbers first. That's usually how it happens. The days' figures, the times and totals and dates, loosen their grip before anything else does. So, I won't ask you to remember any numbers tonight. Instead, I'll hand them to you one at a time, slowly, and turn each one into something you can actually feel, because the size of these animals is the first thing that's almost impossible to believe, and the most beautiful thing to try. Let's begin with something you know. Picture a city bus, the long kind, idling at the curb on a gray morning. You know its size in your body. You know how it feels to stand beside one, the way it blocks the wind, the way you have to tilt your head to see the top of it. Hold that bus in your mind. Now place beside it the largest land animal alive in the world today, the African elephant. A big bull elephant stands taller than a person can reach and weighs as much as a small truck. Beside the bus, he holds his own. He is genuinely enormous, the king of every living thing that walks on land. Keep them both there, side by side, the bus and the elephant, because they are about to become very, very small. Now, into that same picture, let me bring an animal called Argentinosaurus. We know it from fossils found in the dry red rock of Argentina, which is how it earned its name. It was a sauropod, one of those long-necked giants we watched walking across the floodplain last night. And here is the thing your mind will resist. So let it resist gently, and then let it through. Argentinosaurus may have stretched well over 30 meters from the tip of its nose to the end of its tail. That is longer than 3 of those city buses parked end to end. Its weight is harder to pin down because no scale on Earth was ever built to hold it. But the careful estimates land somewhere around 70, perhaps even 100 tons. Set that against the elephant you were just admiring. It would take more than a dozen of the largest bull elephants alive, piled together, to match the weight of this single animal. The elephant, the king of all living land creatures, would have walked beneath its belly without needing to lower his head. Sit with that for a moment in the unhurried way we have all night to do. The biggest animal walking the earth right now would have been a footnote in a world like that, not a rival, not a smaller cousin, simply too small to matter to it. And Argentinosaurus was not alone in that weight class. It had relatives, Patagotitan, Dreadnoughtus, a whole quiet dynasty of titans whose names read like the names of warships because the people who found them reached for the biggest words they had and still came up short. Dreadnoughtus was named quite deliberately to mean fears nothing. And why would it? Imagine being so large that no predator on Earth could meaningfully threaten you once you were grown. No need for speed, no need for armor, no need for fear. Just the slow, certain business of eating enough green to keep a body the size of a building alive. These animals had to consume hundreds of kilograms of plant matter every single day, stripping whole trees the way you might pull grapes from a stem. They were less like animals in some ways, and more like slow weather, moving systems of muscle and bone that reshaped the land simply by passing through it. But length lying along the ground is one thing, height is another, and height is where these giants did something that no animal has done before or since. Let me move you from the bus to a building. Picture a quiet street of houses at night, the kind you might walk down on the way home. 2 stories tall, a lit window here and there. The roofline of one of those houses sits perhaps 6 or 7 meters up, high enough that you would never dream of reaching it. Now picture Brachiosaurus. Unlike most of the long-necked giants, Brachiosaurus held its neck high, angled up toward the sky like a great living crane, because its front legs were longer than its back ones. When it raised its head to feed, the top of that head rose to around 12, maybe 13 meters above the ground. It could have looked into the window of a 3rd or 4th floor. It could have lifted its face above the roofline of the house you just pictured and gazed out over the whole sleeping street, an animal browsing the treetops, standing taller than the building you live in. And even Brachiosaurus was not the ceiling. There was a creature known so far only from a few enormous neck bones found in Oklahoma that scientists named sauropods, Poseidon lizard, after the god who shook the earth. From those few bones, they estimate it could raise its head some 17 or 18 meters into the air. That is roughly the height of a 6-story building. Imagine standing on the sidewalk and looking up, past the 2nd floor, past the 4th, past the 6th, and finding a living face looking quietly back down at you, chewing. Not a machine, not a crane, a warm animal with a heartbeat, reaching up into a layer of the world that, today, belongs only to birds and clouds. How does a heart even push blood up a neck like that? That question has kept scientists awake, in the good way, for decades. The column of a sauropods' neck was so long that getting blood all the way to the brain would have demanded a heart of extraordinary power, or a clever system of valves and pressures we still don't fully understand. The closer you look at these animals, the stranger and more wonderful the engineering becomes. They were not just big, they were solutions to problems of bigness that life has never had to solve again. Now, I know what shape your imagination has been bending toward this whole time, because when most of us think of a dinosaur and feel that small electric thrill, we are not thinking of the gentle giants reaching into the treetops. We are thinking of the hunter. So let me bring it in, slowly, the way it would have come, not charging, but simply arriving. The smaller animals going quiet around it. Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. And here, the surprise runs in the opposite direction. The hunters were not the biggest dinosaurs, not even close. A full-grown Tyrannosaurus was around 12, perhaps 13 meters long, about the length of a single city bus, and weighed somewhere between 8 and 9 tons. Heavy, yes, heavier than 2 elephants, but against Argentinosaurus, it was a slight thing, a fraction of the weight. The largest land predators in history were dwarfed by the plant eaters they shared the world with. The giants of the Mesozoic ate leaves. What made Tyrannosaurus terrible was never its size. It was the bite. Inside that great skull, itself longer than the height of a tall man, were teeth that have to be seen to be believed. Not thin slicing blades like a shark's, but thick banana-shaped spikes, some of them as long as your forearm. Set in jaws driven by slabs of muscle, we can estimate the force of that bite from the marks left in fossil bone. And the numbers are simply unlike anything alive. A Tyrannosaurus could bite down with a force measured in tens of thousands of newtons, strong enough to crush bone outright, to shear through the leg of a horned dinosaur, as you might bite through a carrot. The strongest bite of any land animal that has ever lived, by a wide margin, a modern crocodile, which has the most powerful bite of any creature alive today, would have seemed gentle by comparison. This was an animal that did not need to wrestle its prey. It simply closed its mouth, and the matter was settled. Let me give you one more comparison, because I think it's the one that lands deepest in the dark. The largest predatory fish in the seas today is the great white shark, an animal that lives in our nightmares and our films, a creature we treat as the very edge of what nature dares to build. A big great white might reach 5 or 6 meters in length. Now hold it beside a sea reptile called Mosasaurus. Not a dinosaur exactly, but a giant lizard of the same lost age that ruled the oceans, while the dinosaurs ruled the land. Mosasaurus could grow to perhaps 15, even 17 meters. The shark we fear most would have been prey, a single mouthful or close to it. The thing that haunts our deep water today would have swum its whole life in fear of something 3 times its size, patrolling the same blue dark. And while we're beneath the waves, there is one more giant I have to set in front of you, because it complicates everything in a way I find quietly moving. You may have heard that the blue whale is the largest animal that has ever existed, larger than any dinosaur, the biggest creature in the whole history of life. And that's true. A blue whale can stretch to nearly 30 meters and weigh well over 150 tons, more than the heaviest dinosaur we've ever found. But notice the difference. The whale achieves its impossible size in water, held up by the sea, weightless, never having to fight gravity for a single moment of its life. The dinosaurs did it on land, on legs, carrying every ton of themselves across solid ground, day after day, year after year. The blue whale is the largest animal ever to live. Argentinosaurus may be the largest animal ever to stand. And standing, it turns out, is the harder miracle. That is the scale of the world we'll be imagining back into existence. Not just big animals, animals at the absolute limit of what flesh and bone can do, animals that pressed against the ceiling of physics itself. When you picture them returning, picture this honestly. Picture a neck rising past your bedroom window into the night. Picture a footstep you'd feel in your chest before you ever heard it. Picture a bite that ends a creature the size of a truck without a struggle. These were not large versions of the animals you know. They were a different order of being, built to a scale the living world has quietly forgotten how to make. And here is the gentle turn I'll leave you on tonight. The thought to carry down into sleep. An animal that large is not just a bigger animal. It is a force that bends the whole world around it. A creature that eats a ton of plants a day must have changed the very shape of the forests it walked through. A predator with that bite must have set the rhythm of fear for every living thing within miles. To imagine bringing one of these back is not to imagine adding a single large animal to the world. It is to imagine reintroducing a kind of power the Earth has not felt in 66 million years, and to wonder, quietly, whether the world as it is now could even hold it. But that's a question for another night, further down the road. For now, just let them stand there in the dark, impossibly tall, impossibly heavy, perfectly calm, and let yourself grow small and safe and sleepy beneath them. For 165 million years, the dinosaurs simply lived. That's the part we tend to skip over, isn't it? Straight from the giants to the disaster, from the wonder to the catastrophe, as if their whole existence were just a long prologue to the day it ended. But they were not waiting to die. They had no idea anything was coming. For a stretch of time so vast, it makes our entire species look like a single afternoon. They were just animals, getting on with the ordinary business of being alive. And tonight, before we talk about how that ended, I want to spend a little while in the ordinariness, in the days that were just days. So let's go down into one of those days. Not a dramatic one. An average Tuesday in the Cretaceous, 75 million years ago, in a warm coastal lowland that will one day be Montana. The world here is greener and wetter than any landscape you've walked through. There is no grass yet. Grass is a latecomer. It barely exists in this age. So the ground is carpeted instead, with ferns and low cycads, and the rivers are lined with the first flowering plants, magnolias and their relatives, just beginning their slow conquest of the world. The air's humid and full of insects. Dragonflies cross the water, and moving through it all in numbers are the herds. This is the first thing the fossils tell us. Once you learn to read them, many dinosaurs lived together in one place in Montana. Paleontologists found the remains of thousands of duck-billed dinosaurs called Maiasaura, all in the same layer of rock. A single herd, possibly tens of thousands strong, that died together in some ancient disaster and lay down together in the stone. These were not lonely monsters. They were social animals, moving across the land in great migrating crowds. The young in the middle, the adults at the edges, exactly the way zebra and wildebeest move across the plains of Africa today. And that same Maiasaura gave us one of the tenderest discoveries in all of paleontology, the one that earned its name. Maiasaura means good mother lizard, because we found its nests. Picture a low rise of earth, dotted with shallow mounded nests, spaced roughly a body length apart, far enough that a sitting adult wouldn't crush its neighbor's young. In each nest, a clutch of eggs, and around them, the fossilized remains of hatchlings whose leg joints were not yet fully formed, meaning they could not have walked far on their own, and yet their teeth show where they had been eating, which means someone was bringing them food into the nest, day after day, the way a robin feeds the gaping mouths in a hedge outside your window. These enormous reptiles, these so-called terrible lizards, were tending their babies, returning to the same nesting grounds year after year, caring. It is one thing to imagine a dinosaur as a monster. It is another, quieter thing entirely, to imagine one bending its great head down to feed its child. And they were not slow, sluggish, cold-blooded things basking in the sun, the way Owen and the early scientists pictured them. We're now fairly certain that many dinosaurs ran warm, that they burned energy fast, grew quickly, moved with the speed and alertness of mammals and birds, rather than the patience of a lizard on a rock. The feathered ones, especially, were creatures of high metabolism and constant motion, more like a hawk than a crocodile. Some of the small predators could likely run as fast as you can, faster perhaps, twisting through the undergrowth on long legs with a stiff tail held out behind for balance. The giants grew at astonishing rates. A Tyrannosaurus went from a hatchling you could hold in 2 hands to a 9-ton adult in under 20 years, putting on hundreds of kilograms a year through its teenage growth spurt. These were not the dim, ponderous beasts of old illustrations. They were vivid, quick, warm-blooded, complicated animals with all the drama of any living ecosystem. The courtship, the territory, the raising of young, the long migrations following the rains. There were rhythms to it all. The horned dinosaurs, the triceratops and their kin, likely used those great frills and horns the way deer use antlers to display, to spar, to win mates and settle dominance, perhaps flushing with color in the breeding season. The crested duckbills, with their long hollow head crests, could send low trumpeting calls echoing across the valleys, a sound we can actually reconstruct by modeling the air passages in their skulls, a deep, mournful foghorn note rolling through the Cretaceous dusk. Imagine lying where you are now and hearing that across the dark. Not a roar, not a threat, just a herd calling to itself across the distance, making sure no one was lost for 165 million years. That was the world. Generation after generation, season after season, the eggs and the herds, and the calls and the slow turning of warm green years. And then, on a single day, it ended. We can be unusually precise about this, which is part of what makes it so haunting. 66 million years ago, an object from space, an asteroid, or possibly a comet fragment around 10 to 15 kilometers across, a chunk of rock and ice, wider than a city, crossed paths with the Earth. It was traveling at something like 20 kilometers every second, far faster than any bullet. It struck what is now the coast of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, in shallow tropical sea. We've found the scar it left, buried beneath later rock, a crater more than 150 kilometers across. We've even named it after a town that sits near its center, Chicxulub. The energy released in that instant is one of those numbers that means nothing until you unfold it. So let me unfold it gently. It was greater than every nuclear weapon ever built, detonated all at once, multiplied many thousands of times over. In the first second, anything for hundreds of kilometers around simply ceased to exist. The impact punched a hole through the crust and threw a plume of vaporized rock up past the edge of the atmosphere, into space. But the truly terrible thing was not the blast. It was what came after. The asteroid kicked an unimaginable quantity of molten rock and dust high above the planet. And as those countless droplets fell back through the atmosphere, the friction turned the sky itself into an oven. For perhaps an hour or two, across much of the world, the heavens glowed red hot, and the heat set forests alight on continents thousands of kilometers from the impact. A creature standing in Montana, half a world away from the Yucatan, would have looked up to see the sky burning. Those that survived the fire faced something slower and, in the end, more complete. The dust and soot and sulfur thrown into the high atmosphere spread around the entire globe and did not come down. They formed a veil between the earth and the sun, and the world went dark, not for a day, for months, possibly years. Without sunlight, the plants could not photosynthesize. They withered and died, and when the plants died, the great plant eaters, the herds of duckbills, the horned giants, the long-necked titans, everything that depended on a steady green world, began to starve. And when they starved and fell, the hunters that ate them, the tyrants and the raptors, starved in their turn. The whole vast structure, built patiently over 165 million years, came down from the bottom up in the cold and the dark. It is called an impact winter, a long, sunless, freezing silence falling over a world that only a season before had been warm and green and loud with the calling of herds. We can read the whole story in a single thin line in the rock. All over the world, if you find rock of exactly the right age, there is a layer, sometimes just a few centimeters thick, rich in a metal called iridium, which is rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids. Beneath that line, dinosaurs, in abundance, in endless variety. Above that line, none, not one. It was a father and son team of scientists, Luis and Walter Alvarez, who first found that iridium line in the 1980s and dared to suggest what it meant, that the dinosaurs were killed by something that fell from the sky. People thought the idea was wild. Then we found the crater, exactly the right size, exactly the right age, and the wild idea became one of the best documented events in the history of the planet. You can put your finger on the very moment the world changed. A gray line in a cliff face. Below it, the longest age of giants the Earth has ever known. Above it, their absence. Not everything died, of course. That's the thread we'll keep hold of. Small creatures, burrowers, swimmers, things that could shelter underground or scavenge in the ruins. Things that didn't need much food to survive, squeezed through the long dark. Among them were the little warm-furred animals, our own distant ancestors, who would inherit the emptied world and, over the next 66 million years, grow into the whales and the elephants, and eventually into you. And among the survivors, too, was that one slender branch of feathered dinosaurs we spoke of last night. The birds, small, light, able to fly far in search of seeds and scraps. They made it through. Everything else, every giant, every tyrant, every titan reaching into the treetops, was gone. 66 million years of evolution, the largest animals ever to stand on land, the good mothers tending their nests, the herds calling across the dusk. All of it ended in the cold and the dark of a single broken year. So that is what really happened. A world of giants, alive and warm and ordinary for longer than we can truly imagine, erased in an afternoon by a stone from space, leaving only a thin gray line in the rock and a few feathered survivors to carry the memory forward in song. That is the truth, and it is a hard and final truth, the kind the world hands us, whether we want it or not. But tonight, let's imagine that it didn't. Let's lay a single finger gently on that gray line in the rock, and let's suppose, just for these quiet hours, here in the dark, where impossible things are allowed, that we could reach across 66 million years and undo it, that the asteroid missed, or that we, with all our strange and growing cleverness, found a way to call the giants back. What would happen then? What would it actually mean to let the dinosaurs return to a world that has spent 66 million years learning to live without them? That is where we're going next. Not into the past anymore, into the impossible present. So settle in and let the gray line blur, and let's begin to imagine the world where they came back. So let's begin softly, the way you'd ease into cold water. The asteroid misses, or more strangely, we call them back ourselves, in some quiet future laboratory we'll visit later. Either way, here they are, not in a film, not in a museum, but here in the actual world, breathing the actual air outside your window. The question we'll sit with tonight is the gentlest one in the whole journey, and in a way, the most surprising. Before we worry about the other animals, before we worry about ourselves, there is a simpler question, and it's this: what happens to the ground? What happens to the land itself when the giants come home to it? Because the first thing to understand is that the world they would return to is not the world they left. We tend to imagine de-extinction as a kind of homecoming. The animal steps out, blinks in the sun, and finds the old familiar landscape waiting. But the Earth has spent 66 million years rearranging itself. The continents have drifted into new shapes. The climate has cooled and warmed and cooled again. Through ice ages, the dinosaurs never knew. And most importantly, the green world itself, the salad bar these animals depended on, has been almost completely replaced. The dinosaurs would be coming back to a planet that has quietly redecorated every room. Think about grass. You probably picture dinosaurs standing in it. It's how nearly every drawing and film shows them. Great beasts wading through golden plains. But grass as we know it barely existed in their time. The vast grasslands that now cover so much of the earth, the prairies, the savannas, the steppes, are a recent invention. Spread across the world long after the giants were gone, a sauropod returning today would step out into a world carpeted with a plant its kind never really evolved to eat. The grasses are tough, full of tiny abrasive particles of silica that grind teeth down, which is exactly why grazing mammals, like horses and cattle, developed those long, constantly growing, ridged teeth to cope. The dinosaurs had no such equipment. They were built for a different menu entirely. The soft fronds of ferns, the leaves of conifers, the cycads, the early flowering trees. Much of that menu still exists, scattered across the modern world, but it no longer dominates. The buffet they evolved for has been pushed to the margins and replaced with a lawn, so the first thing a returning giant would have to do is find food it could actually use, and that alone would begin to reshape the land. Picture a herd of sauropods released into a temperate forest, the kind that covers much of North America or Europe today. To us, it looks lush, abundant, full of food, but these animals eat on a scale that's hard to hold in the mind. A single large sauropod needed to take in something on the order of hundreds of kilograms of plant matter every single day, just to keep that enormous body running. A herd of them would strip a forest the way a slow fire might, not by burning it, but by simply eating it, branch by branch, crown by crown, working through the standing greenery faster than it could regrow. Within a season, the forest they walked into would not look like the forest, you know. It would be opened up, thinned out, the lower canopy gone, the tall trees stripped of everything a long neck could reach. But here's where it becomes beautiful, rather than only destructive. And this is the part I most want you to hold on to tonight. Animals that large don't just consume a landscape, they build one. We have a living example to learn from, and it's the closest thing the modern world has to a dinosaur in this respect. The elephant. Scientists call elephants ecosystem engineers. And once you understand what that means, you can never look at a landscape the same way again. An elephant moving through African woodland knocks down trees, strips bark, breaks branches, tramples paths. To a casual eye, it looks like wanton destruction. But that destruction is creation in disguise. By knocking down trees, elephants keep the woodland from closing over into dense forest, maintaining the open savanna that countless other animals depend on. Their trampled paths become trails for smaller creatures and channels for water. The clearings they open let sunlight reach the ground, and new plants spring up in the gaps. Their enormous piles of dung spread seeds for miles and fertilize the soil. Remove the elephants, and the whole landscape slowly transforms into something poorer, more closed, less alive. The elephant is not a guest in its habitat. It is the gardener of it. Now take that principle and scale it up by a factor of 10 or 20. A sauropod was to an elephant what an elephant is to a goat. Where an elephant pushes over a single tree, a herd of long-necked giants would clear whole stands. Where an elephant carves a path, a sauropod herd would carve roads through the forest, packed earth highways stamped flat by feet broader than dinner tables and bodies heavier than houses. These trails would become permanent features of the land, channeling rainwater, creating ponds where their footprints filled and pooled. The dinosaurs would not fit into the modern habitat. They would rewrite it within a few short years. The closed, shadowed forests of the temperate world would be torn open into something far stranger, a patchwork of clearings and trampled avenues and stripped trees, a landscape sculpted by appetite on a scale the earth hasn't seen since the giants last walked it. And consider what comes up in those clearings. When you open a closed forest to the sun, you don't get bare ground for long. You get an explosion of fast-growing pioneer plants, the ferns and soft shrubs, and quick green things that thrive in disturbed, sunlit soil, which happens to be, almost exactly, the kind of plant the dinosaurs evolved to eat. There is a quiet feedback loop hidden in this. The giants, by tearing open the modern forest, would actually begin to recreate the conditions of their own lost world, opening the canopy, encouraging the ferns and the soft-leaved pioneers, slowly nudging the vegetation back towards something they could thrive on. Given enough time and enough land, the dinosaurs wouldn't just survive in the modern world. They would begin, patiently, to remake it in the image of the one they came from. Then there's the matter of warmth. Because the land they'd choose is shaped by climate as much as by food, the dinosaurs flourished in a world that was, on the whole, considerably warmer than ours. A hothouse Earth with no polar ice caps, where forests grew near the poles and the tropics stretched wide and lush. A returning cold-blooded giant, though we suspect many ran warm, so let's not overstate it, would still, in all likelihood, favor the warmer belts of the modern planet. You wouldn't find them homing in on the snowfields of Canada or the Russian winter. You'd find them drifting toward the warm, green, watery places, the subtropical river deltas, the coastal lowlands of the American South, the floodplains of the great tropical rivers, the warm wetlands. These are the modern echoes of the landscapes they knew: hot, wet, green, with rivers winding through them and soft vegetation along the banks. If the giants came back and were left to find their own way, they would migrate, slowly and surely, toward the warm middle of the world and gather where the water and the green and the heat all met. Imagine, then, what one of those gathering places would become: a wide tropical floodplain, somewhere like the Everglades or the basin of a great southern river, slowly transformed over a decade into something out of deep time. The tall hardwoods stripped and thinned, opened to the light, broad trampled avenues cut through the wetland, filled with standing water, dotted with the deep pools left by sinking feet, ferns and soft green pioneers, carpeting the cleared ground in the giant's wake, and moving through it all, reshaping it with every step, the herds themselves, necks rising and falling among the remaining treetops, slow and patient, gardening the land into a closer and closer copy of the world they last knew 66 million years ago. It would not be a zoo. It would not be a park with the animals fitted neatly into our world. It would be a small piece of our world quietly surrendering, becoming theirs again. But this reshaping would not be gentle on everything in its path. And that's the shadow side we shouldn't look away from. The modern forest that gets torn open is home to its own residents: the deer, the songbirds, the insects, the small mammals, the whole delicate community that depends on exactly the kind of closed, shaded, settled woodland the giants would destroy. To make a clearing is to unmake a home. The plants that vanish from a sauropod's reach are the plants some butterfly's caterpillar can only eat. The pond that forms in a footprint drowns the burrow that was there before. The arrival of the giants would be, for the existing landscape, something between a slow earthquake and a season that never quite settles, creation and destruction, braided together exactly as it is with the elephants, only vaster, heavier, harder to absorb. And that's the thought to carry down into sleep tonight. We tend to think of an animal as something that lives in a place, but the very largest animals don't live in a place so much as they make the place. They are forces as much as creatures, whether you can touch. To bring the dinosaurs back would not be to add some impressive new residents to the world as it is. It would be to release a landscape-shaping power the Earth has done without for 66 million years, and to watch the modern world begin, slowly and unstoppably, to bend itself back towards something older. The ground itself would change first, before any other animal noticed them, before we ever had to reckon with them. The land would already be becoming theirs again. But the land is never empty. Those torn open forests and trampled floodplains are already full of life. The deer and the wolves and the birds and the bears, 66 million years of new animals who have never shared their world with anything remotely this large. What happens when they meet? When the giants of the past walk out among the creatures of the present? That's where we'll wander next. For now, just let the herd move slowly through the warm green dark, reshaping the land with every patient step, and let yourself rest in the strange quiet of a world remaking itself. The land has changed first, as it always does, but the land is never empty. Those torn open forests and trampled floodplains are already crowded with life. 66 million years of new animals, every one of them descended from the small survivors who crept through the long dark after the asteroid fell. The deer and the wolves, the elephants and the lions, the bears and the songbirds, and the great whales offshore. None of them has ever shared the world with anything like the giants. And tonight I want to take you quietly into that meeting. The moment the past walks out among the present, and the present has no idea what it's looking at, start with the most important thing, because it changes everything that follows, and it's a thing we almost never think about. Animals know what to be afraid of, because their ancestors were afraid of it. Fear is inherited, written into the body across thousands of generations. A baby gazelle that has never seen a lion will still freeze at the shape of one, because the gazelles who didn't freeze didn't live to have children. This is the deep machinery of every ecosystem, a long, patient conversation between hunter and hunted, each shaping the other over countless lifetimes. The deer knows the wolf knows the deer. They have been teaching each other what to do for 1,000,000 years. Now bring a Tyrannosaurus out of the trees. The deer standing in that clearing has no inherited memory of anything like it. No ancestor of that deer, going back 66 million years, has ever seen a predator that size, moving that way, with that particular shape against the sky. The alarm that should fire, the ancient reflex that says run, that says this shape means death, simply isn't there. There's nothing in the deer's wiring that recognizes the tyrant for what it is. It might glance up, mildly curious, the way an animal regards something large and unfamiliar, but not yet proven dangerous. And that hesitation, that fatal blank, where fear should be, would make the modern world the easiest hunting ground a predator has ever walked into. We see this in miniature whenever a new predator arrives, somewhere it's never been, on islands where animals evolved without hunters. The native creatures are famously, heartbreakingly tame, walking right up to the very thing that will destroy them. The whole modern fauna, faced with a returned dinosaur, it would be like that for a generation. Naive, unguarded, unable to read the danger, standing right in front of it. But here's the turn, and it's the kind of detail I find quietly thrilling. That naivety would not last. Fear can be learned, not just inherited, and it spreads. The deer that survives a near miss carries the lesson. The herd that watches one of its own taken learns to watch the tree line differently within a few short generations. Quickly, in evolutionary terms, the modern animals would begin to rebuild from scratch the ancient knowledge their ancestors lost. They would learn the shape of the giant. They would learn the sound of its step, the particular silence that falls before it arrives. We would be watching, in real time, the rebirth of an instinct 66 million years dead. The conversation between hunter and hunted would simply begin again, mid-sentence, as though it had never stopped. Now let's think about the other predators, the ones who, until this moment, sat at the top of their world. The lion, the tiger, the bear, the wolf. For all of recent history, these have been the kings, the apex hunters, the animals nothing else dares to challenge. The arrival of the dinosaurs would not make them prey, exactly, but it would dethrone them. A pride of lions is a formidable thing, but a lion weighs perhaps 200 kilograms, and a Tyrannosaurus weighs 8 or 9,000. There is no contest there, no rivalry of equals, only a sudden, humbling demotion. The lions would find themselves doing what smaller predators have always done in the presence of larger ones: giving way, surrendering kills, hunting in the margins and the hours the giant didn't want. The whole pyramid of modern predators, every fierce thing we've ever feared, would quietly shuffle down a rank, making room at the top for something that hasn't sat there since before they existed. And yet, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting rather than just lopsided, the dinosaurs wouldn't have it all their own way. The modern world has produced some formidable animals of its own, and a few of them could give even a giant pause. An adult African elephant is no easy target. With its size, its tusks, its intelligence, and its tight family defense, it could stand against a large predator in a way a deer never could. A Cape buffalo, a rhinoceros, a hippo. These are animals that already kill lions, animals built like fortresses. A returning predator would learn, perhaps painfully, that not everything in this new world is soft, and the sauropods, the great plant-eating giants, would face a subtler challenge: competition. They and the elephants want the same thing: trees, leaves, the green of the land. And though the sauropod is far larger, the elephant is clever, social, and already established, already knowing every waterhole and every season of the land it lives in. The newcomer's size is an advantage, but the resident's knowledge is one too. The meeting of these two great gardeners of the world would be less a battle than a slow, grinding negotiation over who gets to eat the forest. Then, there are the animals that would quietly, enormously benefit, and these are easy to overlook because they work in the shadows. The scavengers. Every kill, a giant predator makes leaves behind far more than it can eat. A Tyrannosaurus brings down something the size of a cow, and walks away from a mountain of meat. For the vultures, the crows, the foxes, the beetles, the bacteria, for the whole vast cleanup crew of the natural world, the return of the dinosaurs would be a golden age. There would be more death. Yes, but death feeds an enormous, quiet economy of life. And that economy would boom. The crows especially, themselves feathered dinosaurs, cousins of the very animals returning, would grow fat on the leavings of their giant relations, an old family reunited over the same carcass, 66 million years apart. And the smallest dinosaurs, the chicken-sized hunters and the swift-feathered runners, would slot into the modern world more easily than the giants ever could. They'd compete with foxes and hawks and the mid-sized predators, hunting the rodents and lizards and insects that fill the modern undergrowth. In some ways, these little ones might be the most successful returnees of all. Small enough to hide, quick enough to thrive, flexible enough to fit into the cracks of an ecosystem rather than having to flatten it first. While the giants struggled to find enough to eat and enough room to stand, the little feathered hunters might simply melt into the landscape and get on with living, almost unnoticed, just another quick shape in the bushes. But now, I have to tell you about the danger that doesn't have teeth, the one that works invisibly because it might matter more than all the rest. Disease. Every living thing carries a private universe of microbes. The bacteria, the viruses, the parasites that have evolved alongside it for millions of years. Your body and its microbes have a long truce. Worked out over deep time, the dinosaurs would have had their own microbes, their own truces, all of which died with them. So, a returning dinosaur would step into a world swarming with 66 million years of new diseases its immune system has never encountered, never adapted to, has no defense against whatsoever. A common modern infection, harmless to a deer, might tear through a giant that has no inherited resistance to it. This, more than any predator, might be what undid them, not a battle, a fever, the quiet, invisible incompatibility of an old body in a new world. And the danger would run both ways, which is the unsettling part. The dinosaurs might carry ancient microbes of their own, or, more likely, become carriers and amplifiers of modern ones, breeding grounds where new diseases could brew and spill over into animals that had never met them. We've seen, in our own time, how a disease jumping from one species into another can move like wildfire through a population with no resistance. To introduce an entirely new kind of large animal into the modern web of life would be to shake the whole delicate balance of who infects whom in ways no one could predict. The most dramatic consequence of bringing back the giants might not be anything you could see at all. It might be microscopic, silent, spreading through the bloodstreams of the living world, while the giants themselves simply stood in the clearing, looking magnificent, looking calm, quietly changing everything. Step back now and look at the whole picture from above. The way you might drift up and out of a dream, an ecosystem is not a collection of animals, it is a web, every strand pulling on every other, predator and prey and scavenger and parasite and plant, all held in a tension that took millions of years to balance. To drop the dinosaurs into that web would be to land something impossibly heavy in the center of it. Some strands would snap, some would stretch into new shapes, new connections would form. The crows and their giant cousins, the lions giving way, the deer learning a fear they'd forgotten, the diseases finding new doors to walk through. It would not be the past returning to a waiting throne. It would be two different worlds, two different deep-time experiments in how to be alive, suddenly forced to share a single planet and work out, strand by strand, kill by kill, fever by fever, how to fit together. And the remarkable thing, the thing to rest on as you drift off, is that it would fit together eventually. It always does. Nature has no fondness for the way things were. It only ever works with what it's given. Given giants, it would slowly, patiently, over generations, weave them in. New balances would form that no one alive today could imagine. A new normal would settle over the world, strange and unprecedented, and, in time, simply ordinary. The way every wild thing that has ever happened eventually became just the way things are. The lion would learn its new place, the deer would learn its new fear, the crow would learn the taste of its ancestors' leavings, and the world, as it always has, would carry on. But a web pulled hard enough in one place trembles everywhere. Tug the center, and the edges shake too. We've talked about the animals that meet the giants face to face. But what about the ones far away? The ones who never see a dinosaur at all, yet whose whole lives quietly change? Because the balance shifted somewhere they'll never go. That's where the story goes next. Out along the trembling strands, to the far edges of the web, where the consequences ripple long after the giants have settled in. For now, though, let it all go still. Let the web hang quiet in the dark. The giants are in the clearing, the world is learning to hold them, and there is nothing tonight that needs deciding. Just rest. A day in the world where the giants came back, from the first gray light to the last. It begins before the sun. The valley is still dark, the air cool and faintly damp, and across it rolls a sound, low, distant, gentler than a roar, a long resonant note like someone blowing softly across the mouth of an enormous bottle, held for several seconds and then trailing away. From further off, an answer, the same low call, fainter, the great crested ones, the herds calling across the distance to find one another in the last of the night, exactly as they did 70 million years ago. In the blue-gray hour before color returns, a mist lies low over the valley, pooled in the hollows of the land. Through it, far off, the shapes take form. Necks, tall, dark, curved, rising out of the fog like the masts of ships at anchor. Here and there a slow swing of movement as one lowers its head to feed. The sauropods, a whole herd grazing in the cool of the early morning, their bodies hidden in the mist, so that only those long necks show, drifting and bowing in the gray light. Then the sun climbs, and the light changes everything. It burns the mist away in long golden ribbons, and the giants emerge one piece at a time. First the necks, then the great barrel bodies, then the legs like the trunks of trees, until the whole herd stands revealed, steaming gently, dew sliding off their flanks. They are unhurried. They are always unhurried. An enormous old female near the edge reaches up into a tall pine and strips a branch with a slow sideways pull of her head. A soft tearing, a rustle, the creak of the bending tree. The light catches the long line of her neck, and for a moment she is lit gold from nose to shoulder, and she chews, and she looks at nothing, and she is the most peaceful thing in the valley. The ground is wet, and the air smells green, wet earth and bruised ferns, and the resin of the pines. A trail winds down toward the valley floor, not made by people but by the giants. A broad avenue of packed earth worn smooth and flat by feet far larger than a person's. On either side, the forest has been opened up, thinned and cleared by the great appetites, so that sunlight falls all the way to the ground in wide warm pools, and ferns grow thick and soft in the gaps. Birds move through the undergrowth, and they are dinosaurs too, the little ones, the survivors, going about their morning alongside their returned giant cousins, as though the 66 million years between them never happened. Down by the water, the trail opens out at the edge of a wide, shallow pool, one of those ponds that formed in the deep prints of the giants and never drained. The surface is perfectly still, holding the whole sky in it, blue and gold and unmoving. A herd of small, swift-feathered dinosaurs comes down to drink on the far side. Quick, nervous, elegant things. No taller than a large dog, their feathers catching the light in flashes of russet and gray. They drink in that jerky, watchful way drinking animals always have, heads dipping and snapping up, one of them always keeping watch. Then they melt back into the ferns, and the pool goes still again. By midday, the heat has built, and the whole world has slowed, as if the sun itself were a weight pressing everything gently down. The great sauropods have moved into the shade of the tallest trees and stand half asleep, their long necks drooping, their tails resting in the dust, swaying just barely the way a moored boat sways on a calm tide. The herds have gone quiet. The only sounds are the drone of insects in the hot air, the slow drip of water, and the occasional deep, contented rumble from one of the resting giants. A low vibration that rolls out through the ground more than it travels through the air. In this drowsy heart of the day, nothing in the valley is in a hurry. When the light shifts again, it has gone softer, longer, more golden. The afternoon slides toward evening. The heat breaks, and the giants stir, the herd drifting out from the shade and back toward the open ground to feed in the cool of the day's end. Up close, their movement is plain, the slow, deliberate placing of each enormous foot, the ground trembling faintly with every step, the long necks swinging gently in rhythm with their walking. A young one, smaller and clumsier, hurries to keep up with its mother, half running on legs not yet grown into themselves, and she slows, without seeming to think about it, so it can catch up. The small one presses close against her great leg, and the two walk on together into the lowering light. The sun sets enormous, filling the whole western sky with rose and amber and deep burning gold, and the giants are silhouetted against it, a long line of necks and bodies moving slowly across the blaze, black shapes against the fire, ancient beyond all imagining and utterly at peace. The low calls begin again, the herds gathering for the night, that deep, resonant note rolling out across the cooling land, and answered from every direction, the whole valley humming with the slow conversation of the giants settling down. The first stars come out overhead, the same stars that looked down on these animals 100 million years ago. The only thing in the scene that hasn't changed. Night comes down soft and complete. The giants gather in the open ground, the great bodies clustered together for warmth and safety, the young in the middle, the old at the edges, exactly the way the fossils tell us they once arranged themselves. There is the sound of them settling, the heavy sighs, the slow shifting of enormous weight, the occasional low murmur passing from one to another in the dark. Then, gradually, even that quiets. The herd goes still. The valley goes still. The only sounds now are the night insects and the wind moving softly through the opened forest, and far off, the call of some night creature without a name. The mist begins to gather again in the hollows, the way it did at dawn, pooling silver in the low ground. The air turns cool once more, and from somewhere far across the valley, one last low call rolls out into the dark, soft, deep, trailing away into silence, as though one of the giants, half asleep, were saying goodnight to the others and to the stars. That was one day, one ordinary, peaceful day in a world where they came back. The kind of day that would simply repeat, season after season, year after year, as natural and unremarkable as any other. But a world is not made of peaceful days alone. While the valley drifted through its quiet hours, the deeper machinery of nature kept turning, and not every consequence of the giants' return would be so gentle. Some of what their presence sets in motion would reach far beyond the valley into balances not yet disturbed. A story scientists love to tell begins with wolves. For most of the 20th century, there were no wolves in Yellowstone. They'd been hunted out, gone for 70 years, and in their absence, the park slowly fell out of true in ways no one expected. Then, in the 1990s, the wolves were brought back, a small number, into an enormous wilderness. What happened next became one of the most famous lessons in all of ecology, because it shows in plain sight just how far a single change can travel. The wolves hunted the elk. That part everyone could have guessed. But it wasn't simply that there were fewer elk. It was that the elk, for the first time in generations, became afraid. They stopped lingering in the open valleys and along the soft riverbanks where wolves could corner them. They moved more, grazed more warily, kept to safer ground, and the riverbanks, suddenly ungrazed, came back to life. Young willows and aspens, nibbled to nothing for decades, finally grew tall. With the trees came the songbirds, returning to branches that hadn't existed in years. With the trees came the beavers, who eat willow and build dams, and the dams created ponds, and the ponds made homes for fish and frogs and otters. The tree roots held the soft banks together, so the rivers themselves stopped wandering, ran clearer, settled into steadier channels. Bring back one predator, and you change the course of the rivers. It even has a name, a trophic cascade, a change at the top of the food web, tumbling all the way down to the bottom, touching everything on the way. That is the key to understanding what the giants would really do. No large animal is ever only itself. Every creature is a knot in a net, and the bigger the creature, the harder it pulls. And the dinosaurs would pull harder than anything the modern world has ever known. If a handful of wolves can change the course of the rivers in Yellowstone, a herd of 100-ton giants would not make the cascade trickle. It would pour, begin with the water. The sauropods would tear open the forests and trample the ground. And when you strip the trees from a hillside, you change what happens to the rain. Tree roots drink water and hold soil. Without them, rain runs off faster, carrying soil with it, and the rivers below run muddier and fuller and wilder. The deep footprints of the giants would puncture the land everywhere, each one a small basin catching water. So the whole landscape would grow wetter, dotted with countless new pools and seeps and bogs. Water tables would shift, streams would find new paths. A river that ran one way before the giants came might, within a decade, run another, pushed off its old course by a landscape physically reshaped by the weight and appetite of animals the size of buildings. The giants wouldn't just live near the rivers. They would, slowly and without intending to, redraw the map of the water itself. A stranger thread begins in the stomachs of the giants, an animal that eats hundreds of kilograms of tough plant matter a day has to break it all down. And the breaking down is done by vast colonies of microbes fermenting inside an enormous gut. Fermentation on that scale produces gas, specifically methane, the same gas cattle belch out today, a greenhouse gas far more powerful, ton for ton, than carbon dioxide. A single cow produces a modest amount, but scientists have done the arithmetic for the sauropods, and the numbers are remarkable. A world full of giant, plant-fermenting dinosaurs may have pumped out so much methane that it measurably warmed the planet. The very warmth of the Mesozoic, that hothouse world of no ice and forests at the poles, may have been partly created by the digestion of the giants themselves. They didn't just live in a warm world, they may have helped breathe it warm, bring them back in great numbers, and you would be adding a new and powerful source of warmth to a climate that is already changing. The giants would carry their own weather with them, exhaled, quite literally, from the inside out. Then there are the seeds, gentler but just as far-reaching. Large animals are the great gardeners of the plant world, not only because of what they eat, but because of what they carry. A giant that browses on fruiting trees swallows seeds by the thousand and deposits them days later and many kilometers away in a warm pile of ready-made fertilizer. Many plants evolved precisely to be spread this way, and some modern plants are, in a sense, still waiting for animals that no longer exist, their fruits oversized and adapted for giant mouths that vanished long ago. Bring the giants back, and certain plants would suddenly find their lost partners returned. Seeds would travel further than they have in millions of years. The map of which plant grows, where, drawn slowly over 66 million years of smaller animals, would begin to be redrawn by the giants, who would carry the forest with them in their bellies and plant it behind them as they walked. But every gain in a cascade is paired with a loss. When the giants reshape the forest, they make a home for some creatures and unmake it for others. The animals that depended on dense, closed, settled woodland, the shade-loving plants, the specialist insects, the birds that nest only in old deep forest, would find their world torn open and lit up and trampled, and many would not survive the change. An ecosystem that has settled into a long balance is, by its nature, full of specialists, creatures finely tuned to the way things are, and specialists are exactly the ones who suffer most when the way things are comes undone. The arrival of the giants would be, for the quiet specialists of the modern world, a slow catastrophe, not loud, not sudden, but final. Some kinds of life that exist today would simply cease to exist, edged out of a world remade for giants. The modern giants, the elephants, the rhinos, the great grazing herds, would feel the squeeze most directly of all. They occupy the very niche the dinosaurs would be reclaiming, the role of the large plant eater, the mover of vast amounts of vegetation. Two animals cannot eat the same forest forever. In the long contest between the returned giants and the resident ones, the sheer scale of the dinosaurs would likely tell, and the elephants and their kind might slowly dwindle, outcompeted in their own ancient role by the older models returning to claim it. There is something almost unbearably poignant in that. The elephant, the closest thing our world has to a living dinosaur, the great gardener of the modern age, gently pushed aside by the return of the originals. The torch of the megaherbivore, carried for 66 million years by the mammals, handed quietly back to the reptiles. Who held it first? Step back and look at the whole shape of it, the way the scientists eventually had to with the wolves. In the years after the giants returned, you'd be watching not a single change, but a spreading web of them, each one triggering the next, racing outward along the strands of the living net, faster than anyone could trace. The forests open, the rivers shift, the climate warms a degree, the seeds travel, the specialists vanish, the modern giants dwindle, the predators rearrange, the scavengers boom, the diseases spread. Every one of those changes triggers its own cascade, and those cascades collide and combine and spawn new ones until the world is changing in 1,000 directions at once, faster than any single mind could follow. This is what ecologists mean when they speak, with real respect and a little fear, of a keystone, a single species that holds the whole arch of an ecosystem in place. Remove the keystone and the arch falls. Add a new one, a heavier one, an older one, and the whole arch has to find a new shape or come down trying. The deepest truth here is that a balance of nature is not a fixed and permanent thing. Like a building, it's more like a held note, a long chord sounded by 10,000 instruments, all playing in tune with one another, tuned over millions of years. The giants returning would be like adding a vast new instrument to the middle of the orchestra. Not wrong, not evil, just enormous and unaccustomed, playing in a key the others have forgotten. For a long while the music would be discordant, strands would snap, some instruments would fall silent forever. The whole great chord of the living world would shudder and break and grope for a new harmony. And yet, it would find one. It always does. The wolves didn't destroy Yellowstone. They remade it into something arguably richer, more alive, more itself. Cascades don't end in ruin. They end in a new arrangement, a new balance, settled and stable and, in time, simply ordinary. The world that absorbed the giants would be unrecognizable to us. Wetter, warmer, wilder, populated by winners no one could have predicted, and missing creatures we love today. But it would be whole, a working world, humming its own new chord, every strand of its net pulling once again in balance against every other. It would just be a different song than the one playing now. Nature does not mourn the song it used to play. It only ever plays the one it can. But there's a limit to how far this has been pushed, and a question worth landing on. We've watched the balance bend and break and reform, but what if it didn't reform gently? What if, somewhere in that spreading web of consequences, one of the changes ran away with itself, grew too big to absorb, tipped the whole system past the point of return? That is the edge to stand at next, the most extreme place this scenario could go. We've watched the balance bend and shudder and grope its way towards some new harmony, but tonight I want to take you all the way out, past the years, past the centuries, out to the very edge of what this imagining can hold. Because every change we've followed so far has been a change you might live to see. Tonight, let's let go of a single human lifetime altogether and ask the largest question this whole scenario contains. Not what happens in a year or a decade or 100 years, but what happens if the giants are back and they stay and we let the clock run, not forward a little, but forward the way nature truly counts time, 1,000 years, 1,000,000, 10 million. What becomes of a world that has the dinosaurs in it again, given enough time to truly become itself? To answer that, we have to remember how the giants lost the world in the first place. And remember that they didn't lose it slowly. They didn't fade. They didn't grow old and tired and give way to better animals. They were winning. Right up until the afternoon the sky fell. For 165 million years, the dinosaurs held the planet completely, and in all that time, the mammals, our ancestors, never once managed to grow large, never rose above the size of a badger, a cat, a shrew. They couldn't. The dinosaurs filled every large role there was, and they filled it so thoroughly that the mammals were pressed down into the cracks of the world. Small, nocturnal, hidden, scurrying through the leaf litter, in the dark, waiting out the long reign of the giants. For all those millions of years, that was the natural order. Reptiles above, mammals below, the whole age of mammals, our age, the age of whales and elephants and lions and us, exists for one reason only. The asteroid removed the giants and left the throne empty, and the small things crept up out of the dark to claim it. So here's the thought I want to set carefully in front of you, in the slow, unhurried way it deserves. The reign of the mammals was never a victory. It was an inheritance. We did not outcompete the dinosaurs. We were simply the ones left standing in the rubble, and that means the deepest, most extreme consequence of bringing them back is not about forests or rivers or even climate. It's about who, in the end, the world belongs to. Because if you put the giants back into the world, really back, breeding, spreading, evolving, given the deep time they need, you would not be adding a chapter to the age of mammals. You might, very slowly, be ending it. Let the clock run and watch it happen. At first, as we've seen, the dinosaurs struggle and adapt, and the modern world resists and bends. But the dinosaurs were not flukes. They were one of the most successful designs life has ever produced. Masters of being large, in a way nothing since has quite matched. Given centuries, they spread from their first valleys into every warm corner of the world. Given millennia, they begin to do what living things always do when they have room and time. They change. They split into new forms, fill new roles, evolve into shapes that never existed before. Because evolution never repeats itself exactly, it only ever improvises on what it's given. New kinds of giant would arise. Dinosaurs adapted to grasslands that didn't exist in their first age, to mountains and cold, and coastlines their ancestors never knew. And as they spread and multiplied and filled the large roles of the world, the large mammals would find themselves doing what their own ancestors did in reverse, giving way, shrinking back. The elephants gone first, then the great cats, then the deer and the cattle and the horses, each pushed out of its place by a returning reptile, better suited to claim it, not in a war, not in a single dramatic fall, just the slow, patient pressure of competition played out across 100,000 generations until the large mammals were gone, and the large reptiles stood once more in every place a great animal can stand. And the mammals that remained, they would do what mammals did for the first 165 million years of their existence. They would get small again. They would slip back into the cracks, the night, the burrow, the undergrowth, the high branches. The world would once more belong, by day and by size, to the giants, and the mammals would once more be the quick, warm, secret things, living in the spaces the giants didn't want. The whole great experiment of large mammalian life, every whale and elephant and tiger, The entire bestiary we think of as simply what large animals are would fold back down into the dark it came from, and the planet would return to the only natural order it ever really knew across the long sweep of its history. A second Mesozoic, the age of reptiles, resumed, as though the asteroid had been nothing more than a long and troubling pause. I know where your mind goes next, lying there in the dark, and I won't pretend it doesn't. Because if the large mammals give way, then somewhere in that picture is us, and this is the most extreme edge of the whole scenario. So let's walk right up to it, gently. We tend to think of ourselves as exempt from these rules. Too clever, too powerful, too much the masters of the world to be pushed anywhere by mere animals. And in the short run, that's true. We'll spend a whole chapter soon on how we'd actually handle the giants. And we are not as helpless as a deer in a clearing, but stretch the clock out to the lengths nature uses, the millions of years, and even our cleverness becomes just one more strategy among many that the world will test. Our entire existence as a species, every human who has ever lived, fits into the last few 100,000 years. That's a flicker. The dinosaurs ruled for hundreds of times longer than we've even existed. Set against deep time, the question of whether humans could share the world permanently with a resurgent dynasty of giants is genuinely open. We might endure, changed and challenged, or we might, in the very long run, become what our ancestors were before us. Clever small things, getting by in the margins of a world that belongs, once again, to something else. There's no horror in saying this, and I don't want it to land as horror. Not tonight, not at this hour. It's something stranger and quieter than fear. It's perspective, because what this extreme edge of the scenario really reveals is how fragile and how accidental our whole world is. We move through our lives as though the way things are is the way things must be, as though a world of mammals, a world with us on top, were the natural and permanent state of the earth. And it simply isn't. It's a temporary arrangement, 66 million years young, that exists only because a stone happened to fall in the right place at the right time and clear the stage for the small things to rise. The age of mammals is not the destination of life on Earth. It's a detour, a long, beautiful, improbable detour opened by a catastrophe that could be closed again by anything large enough to fill the space we filled. And here is the part that I find, in the deepest sense, peaceful. And I mean that, even now. The Earth itself would not mind. That's the thing to rest on. Whether the world is ruled by reptiles or by mammals, whether the giant in the clearing has scales or fur, whether we are on the throne or back in the burrow, the planet keeps turning, the seasons keep coming, the rivers keep running to the sea. Life does not have a preferred ending. It has no ambition to produce us, or to keep us, or to crown anyone forever. It simply fills whatever space exists with whatever can survive there. And then, when the conditions change, it fills it again with something else. The dinosaurs had their unimaginably long day. The mammals are having theirs. And if the giants came back and took the throne once more, that too would simply be the world doing what the world has always done. Handing the keys from one tenant to the next, patient and indifferent and endlessly creative. The most extreme consequence of bringing back the dinosaurs is not that it would end the world. It's that it would reveal, with terrible gentleness, that the world was never ours to begin with. We were only ever borrowing it in the long pause after the giants left. And the giants, if they returned, would simply be coming home. You are a small, warm, living thing in a brief and precious window of time on a planet that has worn 1,000 different faces and will wear 1,000 more. There is no weight in that. There's a kind of freedom in it. You don't have to hold the world up. You never did. It holds itself. And it has held 1,000 worlds before this one. And it will go on holding worlds long after every name we know is gone. The giants are only one of those worlds, returning, and whether they come back or not, whether the throne is theirs or ours, the earth turns on, beautiful and uncaring and full, into a future neither we nor they could ever quite imagine. So that is the far edge. The deepest and most extreme place this imagining can take us, out past our own lives, past our own species, to a world that might one day belong to the giants again, with the mammals back in the shadows where they began. We've followed the scenario as far as it can go. We've watched the land change, the animals meet, the balance break, the throne itself change hands across the long reach of deep time. And now it's time to come back from deep time, back from the far future, back towards something much closer and much warmer, toward you and your own life, and what all of this would actually mean for ordinary people living ordinary days in a world where the giants had returned. That's where we turn next. But for now, let the deep time close over you like quiet water. Let the far future fade. What would a world with the giants back actually mean for an ordinary human life? For breakfast? The drive to work? The walk on the beach? The simple business of getting through a day? The first thing humanity would do is build a fence. Not like the one around a garden, but on the scale of the animals themselves. Vast exclusion zones, whole regions of the warm world given over to the dinosaurs and sealed off from human settlement. There would be places on the new map where people simply did not go. The warm river deltas, the great wetlands, the tropical lowlands where the giants gathered, fenced and monitored and forbidden, the way we already wall off the most dangerous places in our world. On the other side of that line, life would go on much as it does now. What would happen is not a world overrun, but a world divided, human country and giant country, with a tense and carefully guarded border running between them. But a border is never as solid as the map pretends. Animals don't read fences. A herd of sauropods following the green of the season, or a hungry tyrant tracking prey, would not recognize the edge of the exclusion zone, and no fence ever built could reliably stop an animal the weight of 10 elephants that simply decided to keep walking. The edges of giant country would be restless places, towns built behind real walls, roads that closed when the herds were moving, a whole new profession of people whose job was to track the giants and warn the settlements. The local news would carry not just the weather, but the movements of the herds, a sauropod group grazing 20 miles north and drifting closer, a tyrant sighted near the eastern road, the wetlands flooded and the animals pushing inland. You'd check it the way you check the forecast now. The warm coastlines, the very places people travel across the world to lie on, are exactly the warm, watery edges the giants would favor. Some of the most beloved beaches on Earth might simply close, swallowed into giant country. The resorts emptied, the sand left to the herds that came down to the shore at dusk. But where there's wonder, there's a way to sell it. A whole new kind of tourism would rise. Not lying on the sand, but watching from the safe side of the line. High towers and armored vehicles and boats with viewing decks carrying people to the edges of giant country the way we now go on safari. People would save for years to stand on a reinforced platform at dawn and watch the long necks rise out of the mist. The giants would become the single greatest spectacle on the planet, and we would build an entire industry around the privilege of looking at them without being eaten. The sea would change too. Bring back the great marine reptiles, the mosasaurs, the giants of the ancient oceans, and coastal fishing, which has fed human communities for thousands of years, would become a far more dangerous trade. Small boats would be at real risk, not from sharks, which we've learned to manage, but from predators 3 times their size with no fear of anything. Some fishing grounds would be abandoned entirely. The price of fish would climb, and the ripple would reach inland, to the markets and the tables, to the simple question of what's for dinner in 1,000 towns that never see a dinosaur at all. The food question runs deeper than fish. The warm, fertile lowlands the giants would claim are, very often, exactly the lands we farm. The river valleys and floodplains that feed much of the world, precisely because they're warm and wet and rich. To surrender that land would be to lose some of the best farmland on Earth, and to feed the same number of people from less. The real pressure on human life would be quieter than the drama of the chase. It would be in the slow squeeze on land and sea and harvest, not a monster at the door, but a higher number at the checkout, and a map with less of it left for us. Then there's the fear itself. For the whole span of civilization, we have lived as the most dangerous thing in our world. No human has had to seriously fear being hunted, being prey in the oldest sense. We've forgotten what that feels like so completely that we seek it out artificially in horror films and roller coasters. The return of the giants would give it back for real. Places where a human being was not the top of the food chain, and yet we would get used to it. That's the quiet miracle of human beings. Almost anything, given a little time, becomes ordinary. The first generation would find it overwhelming. Their children, born into it, would find it normal. Watching the herds move on the evening news, knowing which places you didn't go, the way children near the sea grow up, knowing not to swim past the flags. Within a generation or two, a world with dinosaurs in it would simply be the world. But all of this rests on one assumption, that it could happen at all. Could science truly bring the dinosaurs back? The truth turns out to be stranger than the fantasy. Some of it is impossible, flatly and forever. Some of it is already underway. The dream that has to die is the mosquito in amber, the biting insect trapped in hardened resin, preserving dinosaur blood, from which we recover the DNA. It cannot work, for a poignant reason. DNA is not built to last. From the moment a creature dies, its DNA begins to break apart, and scientists have measured the rate of that decay, even under the best conditions imaginable. The last readable fragments would crumble into chemical noise after something like 1.5 million years. The dinosaurs died 66 million years ago. They are not just dead, but unreadably dead. Their blueprints scattered so completely that no amber, no bone, no frozen miracle could ever reassemble them. But that closed door is not the only door. While we cannot read a dinosaur's DNA, we have become breathtakingly good at reading the more recently dead. The oldest DNA ever recovered comes from creatures frozen in permafrost. Recently, genetic fragments around 2 million years old were read from an ancient, frozen landscape in Greenland. reconstructing a whole lost world. And from the woolly mammoth, dead only thousands of years and preserved in the ice, we have recovered DNA so complete that laboratories today are seriously working to bring it back, not by cloning, but by taking the genome of its closest living relative, the Asian elephant, and editing it gene by gene toward its lost cousin. Cold resistance, long hair, the thick fat and small ears of an animal built for the ice. The same approach is being aimed at the dodo and the Tasmanian tiger, animals gone within human memory, whose blueprints we can still, just barely, read. De-extinction is no longer fiction, but everything it can do depends on having a readable genome. And for the dinosaurs, the genome is gone, except for one thing we said at the very start. The birds are dinosaurs. A bird walking around the garden carries inside it the living genome of a dinosaur lineage, modernized but descended in an unbroken line from the very animals we've been imagining. This has led to one of the most wonderful projects in modern biology, working backward, switching the dinosaur back on. As an embryo develops, it briefly passes through echoes of its ancestry, and birds still carry the dormant instructions for their dinosaur features. The genes for teeth, for a long bony tail, for a clawed hand instead of a fused wing, for a snout instead of a beak. Scientists have begun to find these silent switches and turn them back on. They have grown chicken embryos that began to form teeth, actual teeth, the kind no bird has had in 100 million years, and tweaked the genes that build a beak. So the embryo began instead to form the broad snout of its ancestors, gene by gene. They are walking a chicken backward toward the dinosaur it descends from. We may never extract a dinosaur from amber, but one distant day we might coax one back out of a bird. And every so often, the rocks give up something they should not have. Examining the broken thigh bone of a Tyrannosaurus, a scientist dissolved away the mineral and found something soft left behind. Flexible branching structures that looked impossibly like blood vessels. What survives is not DNA, still far too old, but traces of ancient proteins seem to linger in some exceptional fossils, far longer than anyone thought matter could persist. The deep past is not as completely erased as we assumed. We keep being surprised by how much survives. What about the oceans, the last truly unexplored place on Earth? We've mapped the surface of Mars in more detail than our own deep sea floor, and we discover new creatures there constantly, including a certain large, ancient fish thought extinct for tens of millions of years until a fisherman hauled one up. Could a marine giant still be down there? Almost certainly not. An animal that large would leave traces we'd have found. But the deep ocean is the one place that still lets a curious mind add the word probably to that no. The one remaining frontier large enough and dark enough that we cannot quite say never. Most of our own planet remains unseen by any human eye. So the honest answer to whether the dinosaurs could return is not a flat no, and was never going to be a simple yes. We cannot bring them back as they were, but we are bringing back the recently lost, reawakening the sleeping dinosaur inside the living bird, finding soft whispers of giants in stone. None of it is the dream exactly. All of it is more remarkable than the dream had any right to be. And thinking this deeply about the giants reveals more than dinosaurs. It reveals the dizzying depth of time and how completely we forget it. We live inside a tiny window, a human life of perhaps 80 years, all of recorded history only a few thousand, and we treat that window as the whole house. The dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. Held against that, the human story shrinks to a single bright spark thrown up from a fire that has been burning unimaginably long. Once you feel the depth of time beneath you, the small, frantic urgencies of a single day lose some of their grip. It reveals, too, how astonishingly lucky we are to be here. The asteroid didn't have to hit. It was a stone moving through empty space, and the Earth a moving target, and the timing had to be exact. A different few minutes, and it would have struck deep ocean instead of that particular sulfur-rich shelf, and the dinosaurs might have survived. And if they had, the mammals would have stayed small, in the cracks, in the dark. There would have been no age of mammals, no primates climbing into the trees, no ancestors walking onto the savannah, no us. Your entire existence traces back, through an unbroken chain of improbabilities, to the precise angle at which a stone fell 66 million years ago. And it reveals that everything ends, and life goes on anyway. Both halves are true. Nothing is too big to fall. Even a dynasty that ruled for 165 million years can end in a single afternoon. But the asteroid was the worst day in the history of complex life, and life did not end. The small things crept out of the dark, and within a short time in geological terms, the world was full again. The whales and the elephants and the songbirds and us, none of which could have existed if the giants hadn't fallen. The end of the dinosaurs was the beginning of everything we are. The catastrophe was also a door. Life is not the fragile ornament we imagine. It is the most relentless, creative, unstoppable force we know of. Hit with ice ages and asteroid strikes and skies gone dark, and every single time it has not merely endured, but reinvented itself into forms more wonderful than before. This gives a sense of proportion that doesn't diminish us, but steadies us. You are small and brief and lucky beyond reckoning to be here at all, in this one narrow window, when the world happens to look the way it does. We are the first creatures in the entire history of the Earth who can look back across the deep time beneath us and understand even a little of where we came from, a creature that can hold the whole lost world inside its mind and feel something for it. That may be the rarest thing the world has ever produced. So perhaps the deepest answer to whether we should bring the dinosaurs back isn't yes or no at all. The world we already have is, in its own way, every bit as astonishing, full of creatures just as strange. The blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived, singing in the deep right now, the octopus with its alien intelligence, the bird outside the window, that is, quite literally, a living dinosaur. We dream of bringing back the lost giants while surrounded every day by wonders we've stopped seeing because they had the bad manners to still be alive. The longing for the dinosaurs is a longing for wonder, and the wonder never left. The real ones lie under the ground, turned to stone, holding up the world, and a part of them is alive at the window. When you hear that first thin call at dawn, the sparrow, the gull, the crow crossing a gray sky, you are hearing the voice of a dinosaur, not a descendant, not an echo, a dinosaur, alive, singing in the new world, 66 million years after the sky fell, exactly as it has every morning of your life.